Being Real, World Religions, Jehovah's Witnesses Summary. So we started going through like just the brief history, how we're doing this part of it, because there's so much information out there, and we try to look at, try to do the history of the religion to get the kind of those facts, and then we try to look chronologically how it came to be, and just to understand the path. Now, full disclosure, we did this with Christianity way back, with the building of the church, and we did that. So we're using the same methods to do this. Not saying they're right, wrong, and keep in mind, this is a summary of what we discussed. This isn't a like, here, know all, be all, this is what it's all, no. So if you're watching this after the fact, or you aren't part of it, this is a summary of a group that gets together to talk about real things, to be real with each other, and a lot of times that includes our misconceptions or whatever the case may be. So if you're watching this and you don't have that context, I want to make sure you have that. This is not a summary of everything about the Jehovah Witnesses. This is none of that, nor is it meant to be skewed in one way or another. It's just an honest summary of things that we discussed in a room, trying to have a better understanding, which I think, and I hope that a lot of other people try to do at least. That's what this is. So keep that in mind if you're watching this. I want to make sure you had that context. That's all we're talking about here is what we discussed, how we went through things. So I'm a bit careful on giving a lot of detail as far as history and all that. I mean, we walk through that, but what we do is we put information, different resources out on 122.us, so you can look there to find out, dig deeper, find out more, and we do our best to have multiple viewpoints, different sources, many different sources, not just like, hey, we read this somewhere, because that's part of the problem, in how we look at things. We want to have multiple resources to look at, and then just ultimately it's always going to be what we interpret. Regardless of what anybody says, it's always going to be about whatever you take from that. But we try to give you a lot of different perspectives and have some real discussions to help figure out what that is, not telling you what it should be. Okay. So anyway, we walked through from the inception, which was like in the 1870s, went through the different leaders per se through the years, because that had there were differences in all of those. Charles T. Russell was the founder, and it started as a Bible study. So Jehovah Witnesses, they started as a Bible study. He was brought up in a very strict Congregationalist religion, we'll say, and he did not like the thought of hell, the doctrine of hell, I should say, and that was one of the things that he had issues with. How could a God? Anyway, that was one of the key things that he really had problems with, and you'll see that flows all the way up to current day. So history is important to understand how we got there, or they got there, however we got to where we're at, is what I'll say. So that kind of started it, and then there was another Judge Rutherford took it over from there, and then there was a split. So one of the things that we do, and again, you can go do the research on your own, but the reason we kind of walk through history, the history of it, as quickly as we can, but still look at it as a lot of similarities, a lot of like, okay, this split off because a couple people had a different opinion and they went different ways. So we look at that, and then we kind of look at that compared to whatever and again, people in the group have different upbringings, right? Different views on it, and maybe from different religions. So trying to apply that to whatever our religion is and say, oh, are we doing the same thing? Have we done the same thing? It's really a neat way to do it. Eye-opening, we'll say. I think it was Ecclesiastes that said there's nothing new under the sun. Anyway, went through that history. I think it was Noor, and then whatever. You can research that more on your own. But the other interesting thing that we found is, Jehovah's Witnesses have their own printing presses. Like going way back when this started, that was one of the things. The founders, that was the word I couldn't think of before, one of them was an editor of a periodical, right? So you get a better feel for what's going on based on the roots of it, and that was one of the things. And then they have their own printing company, so the pamphlets and all the things that are made by the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all in house. They do all that stuff. It's kind of, it's just interesting, as you kind of see, you can really, by understanding a little bit about the history, you can see why it is what it is. And whatever that is up to you to decide. And we have different resources that we use to find information, just to try to give you a place to start. Again, that's on 122. Even have some, really one of the things that I try to do, so I try to find that source that was in that environment, is in that environment, not it just was, but is. And one of the things that I found very difficult was finding, found a little bit, but finding writings or like a YouTube channel or something from a Jehovah's Witness, a currently practicing Jehovah's Witness, that would say what's going on and explain their views. And part of that is because they're told not to do that. So they go by whatever the Watchtower Society says. And you can, again, I don't want to go into too much of that, but we talked about that a bit. I did find some stuff on 122.us. We'll have some links to some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the closest I could get. And not to be like, oh, they're no longer there, and not in bashing it, but I just genuinely couldn't find resources for someone currently in that religion out there readily available. Now they have stuff on their jw.org site, lots of information there, and that's one of the things that we did in the group is we went through using that, right? So we're not looking at a skewed perspective. We're doing our best not to. We're doing our best to really understand. And that's hard to do, to kind of drop what you were taught. But a lot of interesting things, a lot of eye-opening. To me, it's kind of neat to watch people go, oh, didn't realize that. Oh, I was told this. So it's always good to find it out for yourself. I mean, ultimately, you're the one that's making the decision for yourself. It always comes down to that. Getting the right information helps you, hopefully assess and figure out what it is that you believe, and more importantly, why. So anyway, we went through that, walked through the history all the way up through, and then we compared different things. We went into and one of the things that we're doing too, which is a little bit different, we're giving ourselves almost 2 weeks, a week or two, to do research on our own. And the goal here is that people will come in researching for themselves, which I think is the most important part of this group, especially when you're talking about these topics. There's a lot of information out there. You really have to go looking for yourself, and that's the whole point of this. It's not to have somebody stand in front of you and tell you what to think. It's the exact opposite of that. I'm just trying to get you to think in this group. I'm just trying to get the Being Real group to think, to be okay with talking and questioning, and there are many reasons for that. But anyway, going in, it's like, okay, what did you come up with? Did you have, and different people had different things. The miracle wheat scenario, which you go research, and you could find information on that, and then again, we tried to, there are definitely different ways you can go with all of this. But we tried to keep it on the, I wouldn't say just positive side of it, but we were careful because one of the prior topics that we looked at was judging. So we really tried to be as fair as possible in our discussions. And, for instance, like the miracle, there were multiple things that were brought up, and not that they aren't legitimate, but everybody has issues. Every religion has had court cases, things like that. And you can look that up if that's what you want to look up, but it's more of a, like, we all have issues, right? So let's not look at that. Let's just look at so went through the whole, what they believe from their website. Walked through that. That's literally what we did in the meeting. Looking at their site. Okay, what's this? How's this? Okay, go down. Look, this is not much different. Look at this. Okay. Oh, here's something that's a little different. Well, why is that different? And then we had that discussion, and it was really good. We would then look at certain things. So there's a part of it that talks about the 144,000, and it was kind of an interesting thing because the way that this got it started, or one of the reasons it got started, was Russell's issues with hell, and having the torment, not but the torment, having the torment and all that. But also Jehovah's Witnesses focus a lot on the end times. Now, not with the torment side, but that just seems to be a primary focus. And it's just an interesting thing for me. Like, if your issue is what happens later, why would you focus on what happens later? Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, that was just one of those interesting things. So we went through that piece by piece directly from the jw.org website. And that was an interesting thing in itself. You can go and you can find out any information you want in one place because they have it all there. And that was pretty. And the other part of that is they have we talked through they have a different translation of scripture. Now, they didn't start that way. They used the King James initially, and then they came up with their own. And there's a whole thing with that and how that got created. And I'm not going to get into that. You can research that yourself. The New World Translation, there are resources on 122 that you can go look. Again, not us saying one thing or the other. Go look. But they have that version, the New World Translation, online. So what we did is we did look a little bit at our scripture, but I said, let's look at online, and we would compare the two. And it was very interesting to compare the two. There were very subtle differences in certain places. There are definitely differences, but those differences are based on the doctrine that they want, that they're talking about. It's just different, okay? But the other thing is it's very close to the same, what you see. One of the other interesting things that we found is some of the things that they stated, like the 144,000 going to heaven. We went to the New World Translation, which is not one that we use. We use a lot of different ones, but that's not one that we would be using in the group. We looked at translations and all that stuff prior, and it's not one of those. I'll just say it that way. You can research and come up with your own ideas of why. But we looked at it online, and it's just interesting how when we read in Revelations the different scriptures that they reference, like one or two verses down, if you continue reading it, it doesn't, it's just a hard sell to be what they're saying it says. And we found that in a couple different places. And you can say that about Anytime you go and you pick a verse or two and you say it says one thing without looking at it in context, and that's why we have so many denominations, probably one of the reasons, and so many different offshoots, because everybody interprets it differently. I'm just saying, we read their translation, the one that they use, which is the New World Translation, to look at what was going on through, where they were getting that from, their doctrine from. And then just trying to reason out, okay, does that make sense? And honestly, some of it's like, I can see where they get that, and that's how we were looking at it. It wasn't like, it was, okay, yeah, it does say that. And in other places, it's like, it says that, but if you look a verse up and a verse down, you can't just pick and choose. And we did find that. And again, I go back to like a lot of these religions that we're looking at, and I'm sure we'll have more and more as we research. That's what they do, and that's what we do. Let's be honest. That's what we do. We go look at a verse and say it says this. So this is just more about learning, in some ways, what not to do for us. Right? That this is not a bashing of anybody at any. No way. And that was another thing that came up, is there are people in the group that are related to Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's not like we're mad at them, or we think that there's no, you have an appreciation for, we gain an appreciation for what it is that they do and why, and I mean, that's the key, to show love in everything, and to be gentle, to try to understand, because honestly, as I've said in that group, what makes us any different? And much of the time, when you look at, well, it's this, and this, well, yeah, but they'd say the same thing. So that means we're just like them, and you're saying that they're wrong. So does that mean we're wrong? It's kind of fun. It's a really good kind of check and balance. And again, this is not a right and wrong thing. It's just trying to get an understanding. And it's just, as we go through, we're going to find these common threads with different world religions, and we're also going to find differences. It's good to know both and learn from both. Oh, another thing. Jehovah's Witnesses are a world religion, not just in the U.S. It's formed here, but it's all over. In fact, I think we have, on 122, we have some people from Australia, a YouTube link to some people from Australia that were doing that. It's in English. It's translated into like 300 different languages. Some of their publications, I think another one was 184. We talked about all that. So this is Jehovah's Witnesses are a world religion. It is not just a U.S. religion. So if you were wondering, that's why it's called a world religion, because it now is. So we looked at and talked about how it's structured, the difference between tithing, they don't tithe, those kind of things, like looking and understanding that, and how it is that they operate. And there is an operation for sure. It's definitely run like a business in a lot of ways. And you could say that of many things, but very good businessmen. And if you look back at their history, there were businessmen involved. That kind of flows through. And they transitioned from having a leader to having I believe it's 8 board members, or I'm not exactly sure. You could do the research on that, but it did transition from like a single to more of a corporate way of being led. And each of the kingdom halls, they're all volunteer based, right? So they get maybe a little bit of expenses, but they don't have paid pastors or priests, or not that a priest, but they don't have paid leaders. Everything comes from the central office, which is up in New York. So, again, this is not meant as a history lesson. You can go do your own history lessons You can go find the history in multiple places. Links are on the 122, or go find it for yourself, which is actually the only reason we put things out there on 122 is just to get you started. So you can see, oh, I can look at this and look at this, and then go from there. It's not a no all be all, not meant to be that. Just to get you, get your feet wet, we'll say. Going through, doing some of that research if you're interested. Some really interesting stuff. We talked about, many encounters with those at the door, and how to, and we talked about how to interact, and not in a like, oh, this is how you get your point across way, but just in a like, take the walls down. We're just people. Let's have conversations, talk about different things, and be willing to have those real conversations with them too, instead of just avoiding, because that's important. Right, so to wrap this up, we talked about all those things. We looked through the history. It wasn't a lot of history for Jehovah's Witnesses, so we were able to get through that relatively quickly, and then have discussions, and again, look at directly from their information. I had a couple pamphlets from some folks that had paid me a visit a couple times, and I had saved those, passed those around. There are multiple resources on 122 that you can look at to get a better idea, and then span out from there, right? This is really just us discussing it, being open, identifying things that we see, having that better understanding, and being more willing to have conversations again, and be real with people. That's the goal here, and not be confrontational. Have some empathy, and they're just like us. They're trying to help us out. That's really the interesting thing about a lot of this is they're trying to help you, just like you're trying to help them, and whoever that is, right? They're concerned for you, and having that mutual understanding that it's like, okay, there's a mutual concern, which is what we should be. Don't make that concern a wall. Have those real conversations. So if you want to dig deeper into the Jehovah's Witnesses and find out more from a historical perspective, from various resources, check out 122.us. Go to the Jehovah's Witnesses World Religions area. You should be able to do a search for that if you can't find it, and you'll find those resources. And those resources will be straight history, links to their page directly, links to the New World Translation information, because it's a big deal. Their Bible, and gives you some information on how that came to be and some different things there. Again, dive deeper into that. Also found some YouTube videos from people that were Jehovah's Witnesses and are no longer, so they could give some perspective from the inside. Is really the goal. And again, like I said earlier, really was looking for some active Jehovah's Witnesses information that they could speak to, but again, that's really not what they do. And even those that put stuff out get in trouble for doing that. So that's why I couldn't find that, but I found the next closest thing, put that out there. If you have relatives or people don't be afraid to have a conversation with them, and just ask them questions and try to get an understanding for some of that stuff. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learn a little bit. If nothing else, you learn that we need to keep learning about each other. Thanks for watching. Keep being real.